Welcome back to another episode of the Jay's Fit Down Podcast. I'm your host, Jay, back at it once again as we're going to be talking about some football here today, as always, but more specifically the Seattle Seahawks and why they will be scary in 2023, why this team is a dark horse to go and win the NFC. So I'll talk about that, give you my opinions on that, and why I think it's very possible for that scenario to play out there for the Seattle Seahawks. But before we get into that, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. A lot of you guys that watch are not subscribed, so please help us grow that subscriber count and tune in for more content each and every week. Of course, we're going to have a lot of episodes out, coming for you guys, especially with training camp getting underway as well. And also, the season coming up pretty soon within the span of a month or so, a little over a month. So we're excited for that. You can follow us on the socials, Jay's Fit Down Pod on Instagram and Twitter, also on TikTok also. And we're also on Spotify and every other podcast platform if you want audio version. So make sure you follow us there on those platforms if you want to get the audio version of the podcast. So without further ado, let's begin. So we're going to be talking about, again, the Seahawks here. This is a team they had an interesting season last year. Of course, they traded away Russell Wilson right to the Broncos, just trying to move on from that era, trying to move on from him and that whole thing going on there. So they bring in Geno Smith, they already had Geno Smith on the roster, but they make him the starter. He wins in training camp over Drew Lock, as we all would expect. Well, I guess some of us a lot of us didn't really expect that to happen. So, because you got to think about it, that those quarterbacks at the time, I'm thinking they're not not that much better than the other. But obviously, Geno Smith proved me wrong because he went out and had a phenomenal season for Seattle. He threw for 4,282 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, led the league with a 69.8 completion percentage. Also, meaning he was very accurate with the football, throwing the ball. He also ran for 368 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. So, and Geno Smith also won Comeback Player of the Year. So, he had a great season last year. And the Seahawks went to the playoffs. Lost to the 49ers in the first round. But, if you were a fan of the team, then you probably say, that was a good year for us, considering what happened, considering we traded away our franchise cornerstone quarterback in Russell Wilson. And, Geno's is kind of this journeyman guy. He's bounced around a lot of teams, started a lot of places. And he's given the keys to the car, completely for this year. And still dealt with injuries, right? So it's you can talk about a lot of different factors there for the team and for them to still go and make the playoffs, and win a lot of those some close games, some competitive games. The Seahawks did impress, in 2022. I think they had a great season for expectations as far as they were concerned. I think they exceeded them last year, making the playoffs, because I didn't think they'd be that good as they were. And offensively, you talk about just the dynamic players that have. This is why I think they're going to be a team that you have to watch out for. And granted, the 49ers, Brock Purdy was cleared to practice, right? So he's going to be practicing, and the plan is for him, I guess, to be the starter this year in San Francisco. But, still, it's I don't know. With the 49ers, I just don't know. They've made some great additions, and as long as everybody's healthy for them, then, I see them taking home the NFC West once again, because the Rams are not going to pose a threat at all. The Cardinals will definitely not pose a threat at all. Those are two teams that are kind of in limbo right now as far as, especially with their quarterback situation. So it's the really that division is the Seahawks and 49ers division to lose. And it's between those two right now. And honestly, it might even be more so Seattle, because again, I say this because the 49ers still we don't know what's going to the quarterback situation, we don't know. The way they get hurt and the way that Shanahan likes to run his offense and things like that, I just don't it's too many variables. And for me, I just think that the Seahawks have a great chance to win the division this year, and I think they can. Look up and down the roster. They have some talented players, particularly on offense. DK Metcalf, of course. Tyler Lockett is still a beast. He's still, going out there and getting it done. and and Kenneth Walker in the backfield had a great season as a rookie, over 1,000 yards rushing as a rookie last year. He had a great season, so I expect him to continue to improve and get better and better and better, and also just be a dynamic piece of that offense, right, of that attack. But the position that they were really lacking in was in the slot. They didn't have much production coming out of the slot position, and that's where you slide in their draft pick of the 2023 is Jackson Smith and Jiba. You slide him in there, and he's gonna, I really think he takes that offense to a whole other level. I mean, this guy, he had like 300 yards receiving, like 2021. I remember it because he only played 3 games in 2022 when he was at Ohio State, but in 2021 he had this crazy game. I forgot which team it was they were playing against, but he had a crazy game. He had like 300 receiving yards, and like 4 or 5 touchdowns. It was insane performance by him. This is a guy that his work in the intermediate and short areas are really like it's lethal. Because when he runs routes and he's got that great in and out speed and the quick feet, those are very important traits for a receiver. Everybody, of course, like, hey, you got to be able to catch the ball, you got to be able to run routes, and you got to you got to be fast, right? And of course, all those things are important, but one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is your ability to work in intermediate and middle zone areas to short areas like your curl routes, your digs, your up and unders, like your out routes. Like those are very key routes and areas that you have to be able to work the field, working the sidelines, those deep and middle third parts of the field that you have to be able to work as a receiver because defense is going to be playing against the deep pass. So they're going to force you to be able to work in that middle area, right? And he's a receiver, similarly to Tyler Lockett, that can really just sit in those zone areas and and he uses run after catch ability to gain yards, right? And that just adds more and more pressure to the defense to figure out, okay, well, if we can cover the deep part of the field, but then again, he can just go under, and just dink it and dunk it to Smith and Jiba the whole game, because he's a guy that can just really go crazy right there in those intermediate areas. So it's like, so if we try to cover that, but then they send Tyler Lockett deep, DK Metcalf deep, whatever. Like, it's just, and then they also have to worry about Kenneth Walker coming out the backfield, which is a whole other story because he's a very physical runner, a guy that can explode. Had like a 75-yard touchdown run against the Saints last year. I mean, I was very impressed with his rookie season, in 2022, and I think he's only going to continue, like I said, to get better, and be a top back in this league when it's all said and done in a couple of years. So that's my thing. I just really think your offense can go to a harder level. Geno Smith is going to have a great year. I mean, they re-signed him to that 3-year, $75 million deal. So they brought him back, which is huge for the offense. He was like, hey, he wanted to be there. He's like, hey, you know what? I want to be here. I want to be in Seattle. This is my team, like my city. I want to play for this team. And I honestly believe that he is the guy for them, and that because of that, and we'll get to defense in a second, but because of that, I think they can make a jump and win the NFC West this year. But moving on to the other side of the football, the defensive unit for the Seattle Seahawks, underperformed last year and was not the best for a Pete Carroll defense. And so to put it into terms, they had the third worst run defense, allowed 100 yards rushing in all but 4 games last year, including the postseason. So they brought back Bobby Wagner after he had a little stint with the Rams for a year. They brought him back. They signed Jermont Jones, the defensive lineman, and they brought in Julian Love to go in that secondary with Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams, and Tariq Woolen. So honestly, I think this defense has so much room to be very good, a very dominant defense. I think they can be. They've got the players, and they've re-signed Uchenna Nwosu to a 3-year, 3-year extension for $59 million. And he had 9.5 sacks last year, so it was a breakout season for him. And he's a very good edge rusher. He's a guy that's very underrated. I think that he's not getting enough talk, and I think he's going to be a great pass rusher in this league. He's going to continue to be a great pass rusher in this league. He played for the Chargers 2021 with the Seahawks last year, balled out, got that deal. So I'm happy for him, and now he's got his money, so now he's got to continue to go out and earn it, which I think he will. And then they drafted Devin Witherspoon, one of the top cornerbacks in the draft. Physical corner. He can play man. He can play zone. He's got good speed. He's got good hands. This is a guy that they really like. Seattle they have a type when it comes to the cornerbacks that they draft. Look at Richard Sherman. Look at Tariq Woolen. Look at those guys. Right? They have a type that they go after. So it's obvious that they want to make they're trying to recreate that Legion of Boom style as far as the defense. Physical, long, lengthy, hard hitting defense that they used to have some years ago. I'll never forget. That Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, and Michael Bennett. Bobby Wagner, of course, like that. Those Seahawks teams, or rather, those Seahawks defenses. Were just so hard to do anything against back in that time. And it seems like forever ago. It was about 6-7 years ago. It was crazy to think about it like that. But here we are in 2023, and they're trying to recreate that boom, that aura, that passion on the defense side of football, which they really need. Because you're you're in the NFC, so at some point you're going to play teams like Dallas and the 49ers, and the Eagles in the playoffs. So that's you have to be able to match their physicality. You've got to be able to bump them, hit them hard. Be able to cover, and stop the run, which is so important. You have to be able to stop the run. It's something they struggle with. So I see them getting better in that aspect too. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But like I said, overall, I think the Seahawks are going to, they're going to be a scary team this year. The team you got to watch out for. That's my opinion. You guys let me know what you think in the comments about it. Will Seattle, just completely pull the rug up from everybody and win the NFC. Who knows? Win the whole conference. Could they win the conference? It's a stretch, but it's possible. I think it's very possible. You got to go through the Eagles, but still, it's it's the NFL. Anything can happen. But sitting here right here today, of course, I still have the Eagles come out the NFC, representing the NFC. But again, there's the possibility that Seattle can. You saw the 49ers, they as putrid as they look in that game against the NFC Championship game against the Seahawks, or against the Eagles rather. They still they made it competitive for somewhat for a certain amount of time. Shortened amount of time. They did make it competitive. They were fighting, so that makes me think hey, and the Seahawks were competing with San Francisco also, in the playoff game. So it's if they're a team, they can fight, they can compete, and they can play with the best of the best, So it's just a matter of defense has got to get under control. They got to be able to stop the run. They got to be able to get after the passer more, generate a bit more of a pass rush. That's what I'm looking for them to do. But in other NFL news, Saquon Barkley signed a 1-year, $11 million deal to return to the Giants. So we'll see what happens with that. It's this whole situation, this whole running back situation is just really crazy. And I made a video about it a while ago. You guys can check it out there on the channel. But it's these guys are just they're being very undervalued, underappreciated, and it's just crazy. Because they. The production that they give, especially when you need it the most, it's that's when it only gets acknowledged, but throughout then, before then, it's they don't acknowledge it at all. And these guys should be getting paid for what they're able to do. Not saying they should, go out and ask for lucrative contracts, but, contracts that are deserving of the production that they are putting on the field. So that makes me think, with the Giants and Saquon Barkley, Saquon is an amazing back, and they paid Daniel Jones before him, so that I know he's probably feeling the type of way about that, who wouldn't, because Daniel is not, some world-class quarterback, but, we'll see what happens there. So that's just some news right there. Jimmy Graham also returning to football, signing a 1-year deal with the New Orleans Saints. So he's coming out of retirement to play football again. So I haven't seen that name, heard that name in a while. Jimmy Graham, last I saw, he was playing for the Bears. So But now he's coming back playing football again for the team that drafted him, which was the New Orleans Saints. So we'll see what happens with that. But that pretty much wraps us up for the podcast today, guys. Thank you for joining in, watching, listening, however you were getting today's action in. So again, check us out here on YouTube on the channel. Please subscribe to the channel. Leave your thoughts, your comments there in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this video. Are the Seahawks going to win the NFC West this year? Can they even win the NFC? Who knows? Let me know what you think. And also follow us on Spotify and all the podcast platforms. We're there. If you want the audio version, again, I'm your host, Jay. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Jay's Fifth Down. We will see you guys next time on the podcast.